Great. Welcome. Hi, all of our families. It's terrific to have you with us and joining us here this afternoon. My name is Annie Stevens. I'm the Vice Provost for Student Affairs at the University of Vermont. In the back there, you can see my socially distanced colleague, Joe Russell. He's the Assistant Dean of Students and helping out today with this presentation. We are truly doing things virtually here. And we've got a couple of moderators with us behind the scenes, John, Paul, and Cody, who you might hear their voices as we chime in with today's presentation. But mostly, I'm really happy to be here with you, and congratulations to both your student, most of all, but to you as well. I know the college transition, especially in this world and in these days, can be a challenging one. So I want to congratulate all of you as well. I've been at the university for 23 years now, and in this role for the last 7 years. And I've seen a lot of talked to a lot of parents, and this is always my favorite time of year, is to get to know you, hear your questions, and hopefully learn a little bit more about helping you get to know UVM and the place that I really love and enjoy. So we're going to walk through some things today, but mostly I want to give you a context for this online learning. Like, this is our world, right? And this is what we're doing now. Matter of fact, your student may have a class or two that is kind of like this, socially distanced and in the classroom, but maybe some are remote. So we're still working on those things. But I find it, while it can be awkward sometimes, I find it really, in so many ways, so much more accessible to people. Like, there's hundreds of you now online and connecting with me and connecting with Joe, and we wouldn't have been able to do that before. So there's some real accessibility ways that this kind of technology has been very helpful for us and the university. We'll walk through a presentation today of how the things that we think will be important for you to know about your students' transition. Behind the scenes, as I mentioned, John, Paul, and Cody, they're moderating questions. Some questions you'll see, actually, those that we think will benefit everybody. There might be private questions that people want to ask, and we'll keep those private as well. So not every question will be seen. And then we're also, this is another benefit, right? We're recording this, so you can binge watch Joe and I, like Netflix, if you wish, when you get bored one evening. And but you can watch it as many times as you want, and I think it's a great benefit to have as part of the technology. The other piece that we want to make sure we start with is this isn't the last that you will see of our colleagues or of us. We want you to meet those staff who will be interacting, some of us interacting with your student, and certainly those of us who are overseeing many of the programs and the services that we have. Matter of fact, I neglected to say in my role, what I do is I oversee all the student services on campus that mostly are related to the non-academic areas. So when you think about housing, dining, health services, campus programming, those are all the things that fall within my purview, in addition to student conduct. I often say, that's why I feel so young and yet still have so much gray hair. So what we'll do is we'll offer all kinds of sessions over the summer, and I really hope you tune in. We have some fabulous staff with great information, and it gives you a chance to, as you're learning about UVM, it gives you a chance to have conversations with your student that hopefully are helpful for both of you in terms of the transition. And before you get here, you both feel like, you know what, we get this place, we kind of get its vibe, we know the services they offer, and we really look forward to seeing you in the fall. And with that, you know, we are UVM strong. This is a great Catamount family that we have, and our eyes are all truly on the fall and being here and welcoming students. Yes, will it be different? Absolutely. We have got to keep people safe. We've got to keep students safe, our faculty safe, our staff safe. We've got to follow all the state guidelines, and I know all of that is on your mind. It can't not be, right? But I wanted you to know that instead of you having to kind of chime in with questions about all of that during this session, we want you to just kind of take all those kinds of questions and put them aside for a minute and know that we're offering separate special COVID-19 sessions throughout the summer as we continue our planning over the summer and get more refined in what things will look like and what we know at the moment. We'll offer those sessions to you. And next week you'll get, well, you probably get more information soon, but there is one coming up next week for new students and their families. So look for that, and please just try to hold a lot of your COVID-19 questions for those special sessions. And if you have a couple that seem related, that's fine, but we don't want to inundate this program this evening with those. And then the more I think we talk about this, I think the better. And I just wanted to take a moment and acknowledge, like, this isn't easy. It's not easy for us. It's not going to be easy for students. It's not going to be easy for you in this virtual world and the pandemic. And I really want to acknowledge that I know people's finances have been impacted. People's health are impacted. It is just a really difficult time, and this kind of up and down and a lot of anxiety and stress kind of added, right, to what was already can be a stressful experience in terms of transitioning for you and for your student into college life. So I just want to acknowledge that and know that we are going to do the best we can, and I am really proud of our Catamount family, and I know we'll do it well, but we're not perfect either, right? Nothing's going to be perfect about what this new world will look like, but I can tell you one thing, we're in it together, and we're going to get through it together. So that's the specialness of joining UVM. So with all that, let me start the official kind of program and content that we want to offer this evening, and that's really kicking off to talking about just that first year and the successes of the first year and some of those really fun highlights that students experience. And then there's challenges, right? It is not a perfect year. And as I just said, it's certainly going to be more challenging than probably any other first year in college. But the thing that we want you to know is how to get through those bumps. There's always going to be bumps in the way. Those challenges are always going to be bumps, right? So I think about my own college career. My first year, I got chickenpox, believe it or not. I ended up in the infirmary, which probably just dates me now horribly that we had an infirmary on our college campus. But I got chickenpox, and then my second year, my family dog died. And then my third year, I studied abroad, but I got called home on a family emergency. And then my senior year, I fell on ice and crashed and burned in front of the dining hall and broke my ankle in several places. So yikes, right? Life happens and it continues to happen, and just because you go to college doesn't mean things just you get put in a special little bubble, and certainly not now. These days you're not in a special little bubble, and things happen, and it's how do students and how do we help students adjust when those bumps happen in the road, right? How do we pick them back up and kind of dust them off and make sure things are going to go right again? And how do they do that? Mostly for themselves, because that's what they're learning now in college, right? Is how do they do this and advocate for themselves? So we like to talk about the student skills of being successful in these three areas, right? The academic area, the social skills, sense of maturity. Those are the things, those are the buckets that we think about of having students be ready and ready to engage college life. So if we just go through those quickly, you'll see here are the academic skills that will be expected of them. They're going to have to attend classes regularly, right? Or figure out classes that will be some remote, some hybrid, maybe some totally in person. And they're going to have to juggle those and juggle that kind of lifestyle. But mostly they're going to have to show up, whether it be virtually or not, or in person. Attending class is one of the biggest things they can do for their own academic success. Studying more than in high school, they might be coming out great GPA, amazing student, but I can tell you right now, they're still going to have to study harder and more often than they are in high school. Seeking tutoring. I think one of the themes throughout this presentation is going to be, can they advocate for themselves? Can they reach out and find the resources on campus? Can they find that website? who to talk to about whatever bump in the road that they're going through, and that's going to make a huge difference, right? And then reaching out to the faculty advisor. This is the theme you're going to hear, right? Them reaching out. We don't know to help them unless they tell us, right? We have no idea unless they reach out to us. But as soon as they do, we're going to do everything we can to help them get through and resolve whatever concern may have come up for them. Monitoring grades and progress, that's on them, right? They're going to have to monitor themselves and talk to their faculty members about how they're doing. Some faculty don't tell you how you're doing until like midterms maybe, so very different academic experience than high school, much more independent. And then the support system is there, right? So even though they're going to have to advocate for themselves and it isn't more of an independent academic experience, the support is absolutely there. So on the screen right now, you can see like there's this trifecta, if you will, of some great support systems. So not only will they have what their primary assigned advisor will be, but they'll also have teaching faculty. Some of those faculty will be in the residence halls because we have learning communities. And then we certainly have student services that are staff members in the dean's offices, and they're terrific folks. So you have that kind of wonderful trifecta of support academically. There's also academic support through our tutoring, writing center. There's all kinds of things that can help students if they feel like they're struggling with college level work. And certainly we offer student accommodations when they're requested and needed. One little note about the academic dean's office, and then we have a dean of students office. Lots of folks kind of get those confused. It's okay. But just know, like Joe and I, we work in the vice provost and dean of students office, which is real dean of students. And your academic dean are those folks who oversee all of the curriculum and the courses and the faculty, right? So if there's an academic concern, you need to find the academic dean, not necessarily the dean of students. We do kind of all the other stuff. And with that, let me move on to kind of social skills. So this is one of a big thing, right? To transition to college is having this sense of a social skill set, like figuring out university, seeking assistance from us. Again, this theme of advocating for themselves, seeking out the resources and the concerns, managing their time. Oh my gosh, this is probably one of the biggest things I can think of is, do they have a calendar, or do they know when finals are going to be? Can they manage like juggling, maybe being involved in a club with classes, with study time? Like those are the things they're going to have to juggle now on their own. Working through conflicts, right? Their roommate might not be perfect, right? They don't have to be best friends, but they got to kind of be respectful to each other. But they have to manage conflict. And again, people are here to help, but they've got to also figure out some of these skills on their own. And this is why they go to college. This is why they're in college, is to get these skills, right? Lifelong learning comes from this kind of experience. And then, of course, making really good positive decisions about their own health, their own safety. This often shows up like for prescription drug use, or hopefully not illegal drug use, but alcohol use or sleep and food choices. And now, of course, we're going to be really, really clear with them about what some of the guidelines will be around the virus and wearing masks like Joe and I, and being socially distant. And we need their help in staying safe and keeping everybody else safe. And then the last slide before I turn it over to Joe will be, of course, that sense of maturity, right? So we want them to come to college, not as that's the next thing they need to do, and this is just one more, thing that everybody knows you're going to do. It's actually a big decision, right? And it should be a moment in time where you as family members and the student take a pause and really talk about, are they ready in all three of these areas, academically, socially, and most of all in their maturity. So we want them to get involved in clubs and organizations. We want them to have that kind of experience. They need to be developing healthy relationships, both with their peers and their faculty, seeking out programs. Again, there's that theme again I talked about, and mostly being clear about their own boundaries. Like, what are their own ways of feeling like their boundaries are being met, and taking care of themselves, and their own self-awareness, right, around physical and certainly mental health needs, and pursuing those kinds of resources. So that's what today's session is all about, and Joe is now going to walk you through. We've created kind of 7 tips, if you will, on how a student can be supported and what things you can also help with. So we're going to transition here for a moment.
You want to check in with John Paul if there are any questions?
Oh yeah, great. John Paul, do we have questions so far about anything I've talked about? Joe's getting the hand sanitizer ready, and we're going to just switch places.
So, Amy, maybe a helpful thing to touch on is just a general reminder around when families will have a better sense of some of these key dates. And I know you mentioned the UVM Strong opening pieces, but maybe a sense of some key summer dates where folks might get some more information would be really helpful.
Is that more about COVID-19 stuff or in general?
I think in general, so hearing about COVID, housing plans, opening dates, those sorts of things, which I think will be covered in that session, but maybe if you could speak to that quickly.
It will be covered in those sessions, and I don't have the dates offhand in my head, but I know that we've set up a pretty nice website for families, and if you go there, you will start to see, and at the end of this session, we have some upcoming sessions with dates connected to it. But I would always go to the website for families, and a lot of information will be given to you through that, and you can kind of check it regularly. We'll update it with other sessions that we might do as we learn what more people would like to hear about. Anything else, John Paul?
Can you say, there have been a couple of questions, our reality is altered a little bit in this world. Can you say a little bit more about what student supports will look like on campus and how we expect to do those in this virtual world?
Yeah, so, the student supports will be, a lot of the same, right? It will be the same. Many of our offices will be staffed. But they'll probably be a little limited staffing, but students will be able to walk into offices and see somebody. They'll be able to certainly connect with advisors and faculty and staff, at least virtually, if not in person. And the support will be there. So we have a great counseling center. We have health services. We're doing all the same things and kind of kicking those particular health areas up a notch, knowing that this will be on everybody's mind and people will need more guidance. And certainly the residence hall staff will be trained around that as well. Is that good?
I think so. I think we should pass to Joe.
All right, I'm gonna turn it over to Joe and I'll be back.
Thanks, Annie.
Yeah.
And hello, everybody. How is everybody doing? It's I'm trying to transition. I'm a hardcore extrovert and try to transition to giving this presentation without some immediate facial expression feedback is a little bit challenging, but we're going to make the best of it. To quickly introduce myself, my name is Joe Russell. I use he, him pronouns. I am the Assistant Dean of Students here at UVM. First started working at UVM back in 2005. And my main portfolio, or the thing I spend most of my time doing, is coordinating support for students who may be going through a difficult time at UVM. And so again, as we've started to think about the fall, all of those support services are, we think, not only going to be similar to what they've been in the past, but we know we're going to have to kind of beef up some of those resources a little bit. Students are struggling. For students who've just completed their senior year of high school in the middle of a global pandemic, in the middle of protests around racial injustice in the country, coming into campus is going to require some support. And so it's on us to figure out those creative ways to offer that support in ways that will be helpful. My genuine hope, and when I speak to some students, there is actually a sense that I think this is not pie in the sky, but my genuine hope is that some of what we've been able to now look at as an institution in terms of how we connect to students is actually in our students' best interest. Students find it more accessible, as Annie mentioned. Students are able to do something online instead of maybe picking up the phone and making a phone call to someone, or instead of going into an office to ask an in-person question. Easy access to online services sometimes can be their language and they speak that language natively. So that's a little bit of me and what perspective I bring. As Annie mentioned, we often get the question, what are some of the things that we as family can do to help support our student success as they leave the nest, as they head off to college? And so we've come up with some of these things, and we're going to go through. We acknowledge that this is a little bit drinking from the fire hose, so to speak. Sorry about that. Again, happy to have follow-up conversations with folks as needed. The first tip that we offer is a little bit of a hard truth, and the truth is, are you thinking about your students' readiness for college? College in general, and readiness for UVM specifically. Often when I say this, the look in the room, the wide eyes kind of indicate a sense of, Joe, that ship has sailed, like that train has left the station. What are you talking about? Assess whether or not my student is ready for college. We've been planning for 3 years. We're finally at this point. This is happening. I would encourage you to make sure that there is some genuine dialogue and reflection as a family unit with your student involved about some of these things. So again, when we think about readiness, we're going to ask you to think about some of the things Annie already mentioned, a clear sense of self. Can your student make decisions on their own? Is their maturity level in a place that might be ready for this level of independence? Will they take initiative? Again, that's a recurring theme. Will keep coming up through this presentation. An eagerness and an interest in getting involved is also helpful. One of the things that we struggle with often is the student who comes to UVM and kind of doesn't find their place. And when you ask the question, well, you know, are you involved with anything? The answer is, well, I'm doing school. And school is important. It's our priority. It's the #1 focus. But without an interest in being able to be engaged in the fabric of the university and the community, we think there's some stuff missing. Again, healthy social life. This is an example, we'll come back to it again. What was social life like in high school? Can be an indicator about what social life will be like in college. Again, my encouragement to families would be not to think about college as, well, they'll go to college and everything will be different. It'll all be better. It'll all be different. That is not always the case for every student. And so again, some reflection is helpful. Similarly with academics, academic performance in high school may very well predict academic performance in college. And so again, an honest assessment of, here were some of the things that you struggled with in high school. Let's mitigate some of those things and try and find ways that those things may not be a struggle in college. On the right-hand side of the slide as well, again, students who are mainly withdrawn or isolated, who really rely almost exclusively on family support. And so again, family support is necessary. We need it, your students need it. But if their only method of success is when family intervenes and does things for them, the question I might ask is, how do you start to develop, and when will your students start to develop an ability of doing things either with you or in an independent way on their own? How does your student deal with conflict? And how does your student deal with failure and disappointment and challenge? In many ways, you pay us to help your students experience failure, disappointment, and challenge, and then develop infrastructure to respond to that and overcome that and improve upon that and learn some life lessons. And so if your student really does not deal well with, I didn't get perfect A's or 100% on everything, what does that mean? And are they thinking about college as a time to learn how to make some mistakes and learn and grow? Again, we have here taking initiative to seek support. There's a little web video at the bottom here. You won't be able to click on it, but you can always just Google WebMD partnered with the JED Foundation, and they have a short little video about 5 signs that your teen is ready for college. Maybe worthwhile a watch if any of these things rang true for you. Again, if some of these things are ringing true, and especially if anything on this slide holds true for you and your student, I'm going to encourage you to talk about, well, are we setting you up for success by sending you to UVM for this fall? It really is, my hope is that you can understand under normal circumstances, what we're trying to do is make sure that students come, right? We're trying to get every seat filled at UVM. And what we know is that that doesn't help a student's self-efficacy if they show up to UVM with very significant challenges, and then they start to internalize that things aren't going well. It's their fault that they are not being as successful as they know they can be. So if any of these things are true, I'm going to again encourage you to wait. Major new diagnosis or a major change of medication recently. a significant trauma and loss. I try not to pathologize loss or death, but for some folks that loss could be very significant. Certainly if a student has attempted suicide recently or spent time in inpatient psychiatry recently. Again, an inability to independently advocate for themselves. So again, a lot of struggle and not an ability to be able to share with other people that they are in the middle of struggle. And again, some of these things are what were the behaviors in high school that we can look back to about social life, about alcohol, cannabis, drug use. If there is an assumption that things weren't so great, but college will be the time to turn a new page and everything will be great, I encourage you to think about what that might mean. Again, if there's not an interest in college, it's a place to be challenged, to learn, to compromise, to grow. And if there's an unwillingness or an inability to actually engage with all of the supports that UVM has to offer. Those are the things that for us, when we deal with students who are not in a good place, often it can be some of these things that have kind of manifested and borne fruit. So that was a lot. And again, I'm apologizing that we're not in person and being able to kind of have a little bit of a dialogue about this, but I will pause quickly before we start to move on to some safety expectations and resources to see if there are any urgent or emergent questions that we want to answer right away. John Paul?
Hi, Joe. I think, theme-wise, something that came up around, talking with students about grades and managing that family communication back and forth, and how to be both supportive and to support their independence around that.
That's a great one. And again, Annie will get at that a little bit when we talk about FERPA and how we navigate FERPA here on campus. My encouragement as well, and this kind of leads us into this next slide, is my hope would be that you as family units with your student are already engaged in conversation and dialogue about that. So if you as a family have a question about, well, what about grades and how are we going to know when things are going well or not going well, our answer might be, it is going to be up to your student to let you know when things are going well or not going well. And so that should be an actual direct conversation. I often speak about the unwritten social contract that exists between families and their students. Sometimes it's not so unwritten. It's who's paying for college and what is the level of independence and what is the level of knowledge and understanding of what's happening that you all feel comfortable about, that your student feels comfortable as they assume some independence and separation from the family unit, and you as a family unit feel comfortable of, okay, this feels right. It's not just complete independence, nor are we micromanaging and being in every detail. And so again, my encouragement would be to think about, conversations about how classes are going, super important, and you and your student have to think about what level of communication back and forth feels appropriate or feels right. The conversation, and I'm just going to transition quickly. John Paul, please interrupt me if there are other things that I need to go back to. But the other thing, again, in a similar vibe, if you've not already started conversations with your student about some of these topics, now is the time. So now is the time to talk with your student about what does sexual misconduct and sexual assault and healthy sexual relationships look like in college. And I will speak specifically to families who have sons, young men, again, just because of what the data show us around sexual violence in college campuses. Are you having a conversation about healthy relationships and consent? And normally now is the time when, again, there are very wide eyes in the audience of being like, well, sometimes, sure, sometimes we have that conversation. Again, Annie talked about prescription drug use. What happens if your student is coming with a prescription for controlled substances, or their roommate ends up with a prescription for controlled substances, and how do we make healthy and wise decisions? What about substance use, alcohol, cannabis, and other drugs? Are you having it clear, and are you setting expectations? The data tell us, research tells us, clearly articulated expectations are the most effective mechanism around positive behavior outcomes. And so if you say, we expect you in college to X, Y, and Z, we find that that actually bears out. Students actually remember that and will hold on to that. online stuff. We're going to talk about COVID. We've added COVID. I've actually kind of just put that there. It seems as though for many people, COVID-19 right now is just this blanket that kind of is covering everything. It's hard to see things without that lens. There might be some other individual students or individual circumstances might put a different filter or a different lens on top of these. But our expectation and our hope would be that you as a family unit can, between now and move in, sit down and have some intentional conversations about these topics. What was it like for you if you went to college? And if you didn't go to college, again, what are the expectations that you were setting for your student in the hope of, in the frame of, we really want you to be healthy, engaged, and successful at UVM. And so let's talk about this. Let's talk about what that means. I'm going to quickly, yeah, go ahead, Jean-Paul.
Maybe a relevant question. So, a couple folks have asked, when and how do we have these types of conversations about these information with students?
What, we as UVM?
Yes.
Yes, great question. So we try to engage your student absolutely in these conversations. And again, we do it in a variety of formats. Some of that is kind of online education and training that will happen for them beginning now in the summer. So your students prior to showing up will go through a series of online kind of mini courses. One about alcohol, cannabis, and substance use. One about healthy sexuality and consent and sexual assault. And now the most recent addition to that list is one about public health and COVID health rules and expectations. So that's the starting point. From there on out, it only gets kind of more in person when we're able to. I will say that again, I think we're kind of figuring out some of those answers right now around what parts are in person, what parts might be web virtual series like this, but that will follow through from summer into what we're calling fall orientation right before the start of classes. And then certainly over the first 6 weeks of school, we try to have some of these conversations. Their resident advisor in the residence halls is going to be pretty integral in having some of these conversations, and staff who do both substance use and general health education on campus are really amazing and effective programmers and educators around this area. I also hope that this conversation in some ways happens in really every facet of a student's UVM experience, so that a faculty member on their syllabus will likely have some information about, yeah, we're not going to tolerate you showing up to class hungover or having used substances. This is what it means for me from an academic standpoint. So we try to have that conversation as consistently and broadly as we can. I will name, this is again absolutely one of those times in which the partnership of a family unit having this conversation is key and essential. I will move us along only because you can see how talkative I am, and I'm going to try and not just talk your ears off, and we're not going to be here till 7 p.m. with me talking. Quickly, some important campus safety resources. What's helpful is that on the right-hand side of these slides, under resources, are just some general resources we think you should be aware of. And in the blue box, again, some very specific things that we're hoping students, we're talking to families now, so you can help reinforce these messages with your student for us. Here at UVM, we have pretty robust emergency response management, which is helpful. Certainly, most recently, again, in the face of a pandemic, this whole team was very active in UVM's response and ongoing response to COVID. Again, I coordinate the University Care Team, which is our behavioral intervention team, a group of staff, again, who try to do a holistic way of assessing how is a student doing, and again, what can we do to help them be successful here at UVM. We ask students to understand what policies are, so that's helpful. Sometimes it's boring, but it's important. I'm going to quickly highlight a brand new thing. It's in bold on our slide here because it's brand new. By the time your students show up on campus this fall, UVM will have launched something called a Live Safe app, which will be an amazing health and safety app, personal safety resources, connection to emergency response if needed, an ability just to be able to message someone and kind of check in around, hey, I'm going to walk across campus, and when I get there, I'll let you know. And there's just some accountability. We're pretty excited about it. The students in our student government who are working on this as well are pretty excited about it. So again, encourage your student to download and utilize the LiveSafe app when they get here. A quick note about following safety instructions. So again, when students are told to leave a building for a fire alarm, please tell your student to actually leave a building in a fire alarm. That's helpful. We think it's common sense, but sometimes students need to know that. And again, we always encourage students just to have a plan as they come and go and navigate Burlington. Burlington is a very safe place. That's one of the reasons that I love living here. I grew up in Jamaica. I moved to the US to do college, and I've settled here in Vermont. And we know that still common sense and a plan is helpful. And so every now and again we hear really tragic or difficult stories when students' individual safety is put in jeopardy. And so again, we ask students just to know that they're thinking about and not just living in the bubble of, well, no, this is an amazingly safe place and I don't have to think about my own personal safety. Again, we ask that extend into where they live. So buildings are locked. We ask that you remind your students to lock their doors of their residence halls. This is one of those things that it's such a part of me knows that a reason that students don't do it is because of the community, right? It's like very strong community will sometimes mean it's like home, where bedroom doors might not be locked. You can come and go out of your siblings' rooms, you come in, you grab something, and that's totally allowed and okay. And we just know that the thousands of dollars that are represented in personal belongings in a student room, it may be worthwhile to encourage your student to lock their door and keep it locked. Again, we ask that students not prop doors open or allow strangers to tailgate into a building. And so again, it's a message that you might be able to reinforce with your student as they show up to UVM. The last slide in this kind of resource section, again, specific to some of the alcohol, cannabis, and other drug programming and education that we do. Again, your student is going to be doing an online alcohol EDU course, as well as a sexual misconduct course called Haven. They'll get links to that in mid-August, right before they are starting to arrive to campus, and we're going to require that they do that. On campus, we also have a lot of kind of responsive mechanisms to students who want support around alcohol, cannabis, or other drug use. One of those is the Basics program. There's lots of education that happens in residence halls and across campus. That's helpful. In bold at the bottom of that list is the Medical Amnesty Program. Again, just to name, students who call for help for a friend or for themselves will not face any kind of conduct consequences. They'll have some follow-up because we want to have a conversation about what happened, but they don't get in trouble. And again, we try to make sure students are aware of that, because it really shouldn't ever be in someone's mind of, well, we don't want to call for help because then we'll get in trouble. We want to make sure that students are safe and healthy. Those are just some of the resources that we have available. Any questions at this point? John Paul, again, I'll pause before we move on to some resources here on campus.
Joe, I think the campus resource info will be helpful. I'll keep you going.
Yeah, well, again here, when we talk about upfront in the presentation, we talk about we want our students to engage with the supports that we have, because what's the point of UVM having all of these wonderful things if students don't kind of seek them out? And we try to meet them halfway. We try to make those resources as accessible and as unavoidable as possible. But again, we're going to ask that students start to take some initiative. Some of them in the Center for Academic Success, again, very academic. The Tutoring Center. I talk with students all the time about accessing tutoring as a helpful resource. The analogy I give students is, who do you see at a gym? You see people who, are really trying to get fit. Maybe they're a little bit out of shape and they're working with a personal trainer to kind of improve their health. But you also see people who are super fit and for whom this is like, they got it. We see similar things in our tutoring center. Students who maybe need a little bit more encouragement, or again, that one-on-one connection of some subject area tutoring, but also students who know, I have my academics down, and another additional layer of support that helps me keep myself at that level is the tutoring center. So I encourage your students to utilize that resource. It's free. And again, this is where I would normally pause in a room and look around and say, nothing's free, you have already paid for it. And so it's a resource that I encourage students to really utilize. Again, some other things on the list, the Writing Center in our library, absolutely. For those of you whose students qualify for accommodations through our Student Accessibility Services Office, they are wonderful and they do an amazing job. Our Career Center, which I'll get to on the next slide, also is in the business of preparing students for what comes after college from day one. Their vision and their goal is not, let's just wait till you're a second semester senior to talk about getting a job. We want students to start to think about that from day one and think about those small steps that they can take throughout the 4 years at UVM that then leads to success afterwards. A part of it is what leads to UVM having really exceptional numbers around students who end up either in grad school or in a job within 6 months of graduation. Residential life staff, your student needs to know who their res life staff are. So they need to know who their RA on their floor is, and they should know who the full-time live-in professional staff that will be there to support them in their building. So both area coordinators or residence directors or program directors are exceptional, the most local resources to most students. And so again, super helpful. We have a full-fledged police agency. They're wonderful. I think they do a good job. And again, a number of advocacy and identity-based resources on campus, a victims advocate, a men's outreach coordinator, and identity-based resource centers. The PRISM Center or Mosaic Center for Students of Color, the Women's Center, or it's now called Women and Gender Equity Center, and our Interfaith Center on campus. And the voice that you're hearing in the background, John Paul Grogan, works in our Center for Health and Wellbeing, both Student Health Clinic, our Counseling and Psychiatry Services, Living Well, which is kind of education and outreach. And again, we're going to be developing a whole infrastructure and network specific to COVID-19. So again, some resources that are super helpful. And again, we try and get these to students. We do that through the Navigate app that they have, through their checklist. We kind of ask them to kind of think about some of these things. And as they come to UVM, again, kind of constant reminders about here are the resources that are available to you. Lastly, before I kick it back over to Annie for a little comment about communication and how we manage communication. Again, we talked about the career centers, 4-year plan for career success, and an ability for students to join career interest groups that help connect them to each other, but then also to alum and the industry experts around their areas of interest so they can explore what do I want to do? What will I enjoy? And so again, connecting with the career center early on is always a benefit. Again, it's hard for an incoming first-year student sometimes to think of that as something important. We encourage them to do so. Quickly, Student Government Association, we have many clubs and organizations here at UVM. Again, all of them right now are starting to think about what will be the same and what will be slightly different in COVID world. How do we ensure that physical distance can be maintained? Oh, we're going to make sure that people are going to be wearing face coverings as they do events. But we still think there's going to be a very robust and rich network of involvement opportunities here at UVM. And so again, starting to encourage your student, we think many students are going to be chomping at the bit and just ready to be engaged and involved coming out of where they are. And so our hope is that they will take advantage of those opportunities here at UVM. I'm not going to go through the rest of the list. The rest of the list is fairly intuitive. The Inter-Residence Association maybe is the one thing. Each residence hall on campus has a little internal leadership structure that does a lot of the programming and small community development work. So the Student Government Association is for the whole student body, but each residence hall has a hall council, and the hall council reports up to an organization called the Inter-Residence Association. So another opportunity for students to get involved very locally in their residence hall about what things happen where they live, and it's pretty cool, a pretty neat opportunity. So I will pause and ask, before I switch back to Annie, if John Paul has any urgent or important questions that need to be answered on air.
I'm going to let you keep going in the interest of time, Joe.
Oh yeah, we are getting close. Okay, thanks everybody. I'll be back later on, but it's good to meet you. Well, you may be getting to meet me. I look forward to meeting you at some point soon.
Thanks, Joe. Hi, I'm back. Okay, let's go through some of this. One of the things, and it came up as a question, which I love, is communication, right? So now you have a very different relationship or you will have a different relationship with your student. And I know lots of you might be asking, especially as Joe went through all those expectation setting and conversations and kind of hard conversations to have. It's important to talk about communication, especially being far away. You know, we have students coming from all over the country and all over the world, for that matter. So I think it's really important to start to think of yourself as a coach, right? So one of the biggest things is that we're here. Joe just went through all of the services that we have, the staff that's available online and in the offices. And students have got to reach out to us. So the best thing that you can do for them is to tell them, you need to go talk to your faculty member. You need to go seek out so-and-so. You can help them look it up on the web or look up what my office might be most appropriate, but they need to go do that, right? They need to talk to us directly about what's going on. Refer your student to student policies, websites. That's, I think, going to be really important in this time. A lot of websites will have lots of information we do already, but you know, in this kind of new world, I think the website is going to be the place where students and you as families really find a lot of the resources. And know that if you contact our staff, know that we'll follow up directly with the student, meaning, you know, if you call one of us, I get these calls, Joe gets these calls, you know, and so we'll get a call, it's like, you know, from a mom or dad, and they'll be like, okay, so I'm concerned about Susie, but if she knew I was calling, she'd be mortified. Well, that's awkward, right? So we're going to go back to Susie and say, hey, Susie, your mom called and she's worried about you. And fathers can't get off the hook either. Hey, your dad called and he's worried about you. So just know that we're going to follow up directly, and we kind of can't knock on Susie's door or have somebody knock on Susie's door and just say, hey, we're just stopping by for no reason, right? So we're going to be very upfront with the students about why we're concerned, fact that you called, that kind of thing. We'll work together about that and how to do that best, but know that we're not going to kind of triangulate these kinds of issues, and we'll work directly with the students. You know, please remember that as much as you want to advocate and say there's a roommate conflict or an academic situation or something happened, as much as you want to advocate for your student, know that on the other end of this virtual line here, there are families who want to advocate really strongly for their student, and there is never one way to look at any one situation. I've been doing this a long time, and there are lots of different truths into any kind of conflict, and it's up to us, the staff here, to help students figure that out and to help them resolve their own issues. The biggest thing you can do for them is encourage independence. That's why they're coming to college. This is what you want for them to learn, right? This is it. This is the time for them to start learning how to do this. And then, of course, you can contact us if you've got questions or concerns. You absolutely can, and we'll talk through how best that you can talk to your student directly. We can talk to your student directly, and we'll work that out. Now, as I say that, please know that there won't be automatic, you know, outreach to you. There, you know, Res Life does a newsletter. I send some updates about monthly or so about what's going on campus. But know that because of this actual law that we have, the Family Education Rights to Privacy Law, which if you're of my age or older, we all actually worked really hard to get this law in place and to be treated like young adults and have the independence and the privacy from our families that we wanted in college. So we follow this law, but we also know that there's times when we need to pick up the phone and call families as well. But this has, you know, well, we call it FERPA, right? And while it is a law that we don't share students' records with anybody, including families, like their records are their records, their educational records are their own. But there are waivers that we can do, mostly through the student conduct process. If you want to hear details, if your student has gone through the student conduct process, then there's a way for you to find out more about the details, but generally we would usually just talk about the process with you and allow the student kind of to work through it. Same with grades, right? Really, you and your student should be talking about, so what are your expectations, as Joe mentioned, about, you know, how they're doing, and are they the student gonna ask their faculty and checking in and how they're doing, and then letting you know that. You shouldn't have to come to us to find out how they're doing. Your students should be able to be upfront about that. Health and safety exceptions to this, always, if we feel like there's a student who is really in harm's way for some reason, we will absolutely reach out to you. Those are the moments that we would pick up the phone and give you a call and talk through all of that. Because we know that you as families are amazing resources and so helpful to all of this. Just know that we're not going to pick up the phone every single time. Your student may stumble, they might need a support with some kind of conflict. That's not you anymore, right? That might not be you anymore, and it's up to us to help your student kind of get through those bumps in the road, as we talked about. So here's when we do contact you. This is probably a good moment. Unless, John Paul, are there questions about FERPA that I should go through?
Just also say, Annie, each academic unit has a waiver.
Oh, good. Yeah, and academically, there are waivers. Academically, I strongly would hope that your student would tell you how they're doing with grades, but there are waiver processes in the academic units as well. I think there's a proxy piece to this in the student financial services, where your student can list you as a proxy, and then you know kind of what's happening with the bill, what's on the bill, what's getting charged, those kinds of things. So those are all really important things to know. So I'm going to move on to when we contact you, just so you know. As I talked about, regular emails from us, Res Life's monthly newsletter. We will, if your student has been found responsible for drug or alcohol use, we'll send home a letter, right? We'll let you, it's kind of it doesn't have a lot of detail to it about the actual incident, but generally it's a red flag for you. If you get one of those letters, you should be picking up the phone and wondering why your student is in the student conduct process around alcohol or drug use, right? It's typically cannabis use. So that's not a good sign that they are engaged in other, especially now, with all kinds of safety stuff, they're engaged in other activities that are not going to help them stay safe, and that's going to be problematic for them. Students, if they are a danger to themselves or others, they're at risk, they're hospitalized, we would certainly pick up the phone if we feel like, the student needs more resources than what we could possibly provide to them on campus right now. Please know though that if they I don't want to go too far off here, but if they break an arm, end up in the hospital, their friends take them there, we might not even know. So they might be texting you, telling you I'm in the hospital because I just broke my arm, but we don't always know if police services or one of our staff are not aware. So that's a little caveat to that one. We won't always pick up the phone if they're in the hospital, because we just might not know ahead of time. And then the campus emergency, the fire, actually not too long ago now, we had a young woman who was cooking chicken in one of our lounges that has a kitchenette in it. And, she ran upstairs for like 2 minutes to get some spices for the chicken. Well, she came back down and the entire lounge was engulfed, right, with flames and smoke. So we had to empty out that part of the residence hall. There was about 50 students. We had to put them up at the DoubleTree because there was smoke damage. Students loved it, right? They're ordering room service, and I had to go down there and tell them, stop, just stop. This is not what's supposed to be happening. But we will respond. Now, the fire stuff is pretty serious, and it's all about the smoke detector systems in the room too. Any little thing can set those off. And so the flood is not Lake Champlain suddenly kind of coming up out of the basin, down the hill and impacted campus. The flood is those really sensitive smoke detector areas that get bumped or hit or knocked by a baseball or a football or a frisbee, and suddenly there's water like pouring out into rooms and down the stairs, and that's not fun. And so if any time the students get disrupted by something like this happening, and I don't want it to happen, but I'd say about once a year, maybe twice, we have that flood situation of that smoke detector gets knocked and somebody's room definitely has some water issues in it. But those are the moments, if we have to move students for some reason, if we have to, find them a different room temporarily for a different reason, or evacuate a residence hall for some other reason, then we will give you a call about this, or perhaps an email, depending upon how many we have to reach at one time. So those are some of the examples. Here's our staff. Aren't those nice pictures of us? So David is the Dean of Students. There's me, and Joe you've met, and then Jillian is another colleague of ours that we all work to support families and make sure that you get the support you need while your student is transitioning. So the last tip is kind of having a plan, right? They always say this, right? Having a plan and being prepared. So there's campus policies website, there's an emergency response if you want to learn more about what we do in emergency response. There's our website for student affairs, and we offer that site for parents and families. And then just to go back to that flooding and fire situations, I always encourage, even if your student wasn't going to college and they were going to go and get a job and rent an apartment off campus, I would get renter's insurance. You just don't know when you're in a kind of a community setting or a community living environment. You don't know the next person down the hall and what they're maybe going to do that is going to disrupt your life, or you're going to find yourselves having to rely on some kind of insurance. So I think the renter's insurance is always a really good way to go. Some home policies, actually, you might want to look at the fine print, may cover your student for living on campus. And then, of course, there's all the tips, just as a reminder. Assessing that student's readiness. I can't agree with Joe more about kind of just hitting the pause button and doing that, especially today in these times. Are they going to be able to juggle everything that they're going to need to do? Being clear about your own expectations, the resources that we have, getting involved. I can't say that enough. Matter of fact, that is the #1 way they get over bumps, right? Is being involved. That is key to a successful college career. Understanding how we're going to now either talk to you, not talk to you, times when we might call you or not call you. I think those are interesting and important times. And then the last one that I know you already asked about is, here's some of the dates that some of you asked about earlier for upcoming sessions. I'll be in the next session too. You might get sick of me over the summer a little bit, but I'll be in that COVID session. That's actually, what's that, next Tuesday, it looks like, at 7 o'clock. Our Res Life and dining folks will offer a session about what they can offer this coming year. Our student financial services will offer one, and then I'll come back again, and so will Joe, around a program that we do and that we really like to do for families that concentrate on your own transition, not just your students' transition. So I hope you tune in for all of those and get a chance to meet some of our staff beyond me and Joe. So, John Paul, what we got? Got any questions? It's a lot at you, I'm sorry.
Oh boy, Annie, there are a lot of questions. And I want to name, I know you can't read the chat. There's a lot of concern about opening and the impact of COVID. And so I just want to name that in the chat. And I know you can speak to the work of the committee, but I think some of the things that our parents are really concerned about right now are some of the timeline pieces around when we'll know a lot more dates. And I think, well, I'll let you talk. Sorry.
Maybe I'll just pause just for a second and generally kind of walk you through a little bit about opening. So classes will start I think it's August 23rd. When is it? I think
30.
the Monday, 31st, so Monday, sorry, I should know this. But that Monday, so what we're gonna do is probably have to have an extended kind of move in, right? To keep everybody distanced and safe. So we might back up move in, prior to that first day of classes for quite a while, and keeping everyone in distance. We still need some better guidance from our governor about expectations that he wants all of, not just UVM, but all the higher ed institutions in our state to take in terms of, will your student be able to quarantine at home for 2 weeks before they come into Vermont? Maybe they could get tested before they come into Vermont. These are kinds of the things that we still need to learn about. And then, so I think for dates, you just probably want to say that week prior to classes, think about that's probably that window of time will be move in, and then how we move in will be definitely socially distanced. And then the other piece to that will be, we're still waiting on some of this in terms of governor's guidelines about how you will, if you're out of state, how you will enter the state, and whether you need to quarantine here or at home. So those are still some of the questions. Next Tuesday, we'll try to get at some of the details a little bit more perhaps, but that's what I can offer you right now in terms of generally thinking about timeline.
Again, I'm going to just highlight the Return to Campus website that is now public as well. If you go to the UVM homepage, there's a link to the Return to Campus website, and some of these dates around the academic calendar are now posted on that. So the start of classes being August 31st as scheduled, the last day of classes being the Tuesday before Thanksgiving, and I should say the last day of in-person instruction being the Tuesday before Thanksgiving, and then the wrapping up of the semester and finals all being done remotely. So some of that information is live. We know that people are eager and hoping to hear information about when actually is my move-in date and time, but that information is TBD.
We're still figuring that out, right? Because the residence halls are all very different, and kind of where your student will be assigned is probably dependent upon when their move-in time will be or date will be, because some halls are really big, some are smaller. So to keep everybody distanced across the pretty much 3 different campuses we have. But Joe's right, probably the big markers for you will be that start of classes will be the same as what our academic calendar says, and then all in-person or being on campus will end that Tuesday right before Thanksgiving, and then they'll go home, have 1 more week of I think just remote classes, and then head right into remote exams. So hopefully that helps, John Paul. Anything else?
Sorry, I was muted there. Technology. There's some questions around, how we think this is going to impact students, and I know that's a hard question to answer, but there's a lot of expertise, in the room there with you and Joe, and maybe how you might speculate on that.
Yeah, I have a lot of expertise. I've never been through a pandemic, but I don't know, Joe. This is a good question. We were just actually talking about this too both in our staff meeting, and certainly the many committees that we have and work groups that we have planning for the fall and starting campus. I think a lot of it will be certainly wanting students to engage with each other. That's college, but do it safely and mindfully. I think a lot of it will still need to be remote, right? So, when you think about the health of our own faculty and staff, some of them are high risk themselves. Some are of that age, that cutoff age, that puts them at high risk. So some of this will have to be remote still, even though students will be on campus. The social aspect, I think, will have to be diminished to some extent. They'll find friends, they'll make friends in their residence halls, they'll meet people in classes, they'll go back and forth from, you know, dining halls together. We might like do you have to kind of reserve a place in the dining hall, or maybe they order out, right, and eat somewhere else on campus outside. But that all will happen, right? But I think in smaller groups, smaller pods, I think the biggest thing I usually say actually in this session in previous years is the fact that, you know, you have the first year students in that first like week or two, you can walk around campus or at night, and they travel in like groups or herds, if you will, of like 30 or so. Well, I don't think that can happen, right? That mentality of like, I'm gonna move everywhere across the campus, and especially as I kind of find myself, you know, downtown in the downtown area and exploring Burlington, and I'm going to move through Burlington in my, you know, group of 30. That's just not going to be helpful or safe to anybody. So I think things are going to have to happen big virtually, right? We're going to be in big settings virtually and find each other virtually, and certainly through social media. And then smaller settings when in person. I don't know, Joe, do you want to add in?
I'm going to try and yell from across the room here. Please let me know if I'm not coming across clearly. For me, I think there already is and will continue to be significant impact on our students. You know, for you all and your students, just to think through the sense of loss and grief that happened around what would be the end of high school and all the kind of hopes and expectations about what the end of high school might feel like or be like. I think we're hearing from many families and students that was loss and grief. That was something that needed to be mourned. That was something that needed, and still is something that students are kind of trying to figure out and wrap their brain around. I think we're gonna continue to experience that for ourselves, us as individuals and our students as well. And I think some of the work that we do collectively, families as support and UVM as staff support, is helping students acknowledge what that means and how does it feel, what comes up for them. I have confidence. Again, I think one of the things that we know about generationally students coming into college right now is that they take things like rules and safety and the collective well-being super importantly. It's part of why I think many students are heart heavy and hurt right now by a lot of the systemic racism and institutional oppression that they are trying to answer for themselves. How do I dismantle that? Right. So I am hopeful that where students are coming in, they are gonna abide by the rules. They are gonna make wise choices for themselves and each other. And at the same time, I think it's for us to figure out, how do we help them mark these big milestones? How do we help them acknowledge that it was a little bit different than they thought it might be when they imagined their high school graduation or their first year of college or whatever it might be, that there are going to be some changes to that. And I think then the work we do is really helping not stifle that or not ignore that, but give that space and room, and then give some perspective of, my hope will be that students, when they think about 10 years from now, when they come back for their 10-year reunion, the solidifying effect and the community that was built because they all went through this together, my hope will be that those will be the things that will linger on and that will stay with them. So I will also name, and no one really knows. If I knew the answer to it, I would be writing books and being on CNN and getting rich. And no one knows what the answers look like, and I think we are all going to be navigating it together in partnership with each other with lots of open communication.
Yep, and doing the best we can.
Yeah.
Now on the upside, for first year students, right, they won't know UVM any differently. So in some ways, this is how they're going to enter UVM and what their experience is going to be. They don't have to have that other kind of mourning piece that Joe just talked about as a returning student. I think it's going to be the returning students who are going to be like, what's happened? And why am I both in person and kind of remote sometimes, and adjusting to that. So I'm hoping the first year students are resilient that way and at least they won't have that transition because they just don't know UVM any differently. Like this will be the UVM they know. Yes, no, a little?
I disagree. Because they have an idea what they want it to be.
Oh, that's true.
They have an idea of all of what we've shown them up to this point. They have an idea of all their friends have told them about, and their
Yeah.
siblings would come here. They know.
Yeah.
So it'll be hard. I think it will be hard.
Yeah.
Can I just quickly go back? I know we're over time, so we're gonna wrap up shortly. I wanted to go back in the earlier section where I talked about assessing readiness for college. One of the things I forgot to mention is, please let me be clear that if any of those things on those slides, if those things ring true for your family or your student, it is not an automatic, you don't get to come to college or it's not a good idea. What it is you should think about it and make an intentional decision. And then most importantly, this is what I forgot to say, please be in touch with us so we can have dialogue and communication about it, so that we can put plans in place of support, so that we can think ahead of time proactively. Again, it goes back to the plan, right? Hope is not a strategy. We don't want us to hope that things will go well. We can put some things in place to try and make things go well. The appropriate level of support or resources ahead of time, and not responsively, reactively after it's too late. So it really is more about you all reflect as a family and communicate with us. I love those conversations. It's much more difficult to have a conversation in November of, yeah, your student is really struggling and things aren't going well, and to hear then, oh, you know, well, they spent 2 weeks in inpatient psychiatry back in April. We thought they had gotten over that. We would much prefer to hear now, and let's think about what we can put in place proactively, than to have to then scramble responsively or reactively. So I just wanted to loop back. I apologize for not saying that early on.
All right, John Paul, what do you got?
Well, Annie, it's 6:15, so I want to give you that, that time warning. So maybe you should wrap us up.
Yes.
Okay. All right, well, we're wrapped up. No, well, I do hope that this has been helpful. Thank Joe for helping out with all of this, and of course, John Paul and everybody else behind the scenes. I hope you tune in to some of these next sessions that we have, and you'll see me more. And again, the benefit of this is to be able to rewatch it too, and look through some of the slides and have those conversations with your student before they ever arrive. And I just really want everybody to have a wonderful experience and a really great transition. So thank you for joining us. Joe, any last words?
No, just, it was, again, we look forward to seeing you and meeting you in person and your students in person at some point soon. And we appreciate you spending the time with us this evening. We know it's a significantly a significant investment of time to be able to watch online a presentation of us just talking in a room together. So.
All right. Thanks so much. Take care. And I'll see you in the next few sessions.